Hello, welcome to EDI Landscape and Applications in Systems section. Like other sessions, we'll start this with the objectives. In this lecture, we will cover SAP EDI Landscape, systems and documents that flows across the landscape. We will review the outbound process, review the inbound, and look at SAP transaction codes which are used for customers and suppliers. In SAP EDI Landscape, you can see that we have three major systems in place, and we saw this in the simple EDI flow in our first lecture. SAP EDI subsystem and the WAN. So these three together constitutes the e-commerce EDI landscape. Within SAP, there are three major components that are involved in this EDI transmission process, which is outbound as well as inbound. They are applications. These are business transactions that user use on a day-to-day basis. We have the message control. A part of it, user sees it as a part of data setup, and the IDOC interface, which are hidden from the users. It's a one-time setup, and once that is done, the transaction flows back and forth. EDI subsystem is a second system in this landscape. Then we have the WAN, and we will, in the subsequent slides, will explain these different components a bit more detail. Applications, as I said, these are end user applications such as sales and distribution, matrix management, financial accounting. This application generates or receives documents such as sales order, or you could say payment advice to or from the trading partners. And who the trading partner can be, as we know that they could be customers, suppliers, or banks. On message control, it is a service applications. Those are used by end user applications. For example, create sales order, change sales order, or the side, receiving the ASM, and these are used by applications to generate only outbound messages. Message control decides what to send, and send is the outbound process. This message control is not used by FI applications. FI applications uses standalone programs, ABAP programs, to send the data. IDOC interface. IDOC stands for Intermediate Document. This IDOC interface is a background application which is hidden from the end users. This interface processes outbound and inbound data through application transactions or direct updates. An intermediate document, which we'll know more in the subsequent sections, in the subsequent lectures, it's an application neutral format which could be used by any other third-party application and can be mapped to any other different documents that the other application is interested in. For the subsystem, This is also a standalone application, and the main function of the subsystem is to route and translate messages to EDI format from application format such as IDOC in case of outbound, and from EDI format to application format such as IDOC in case of inbound. And the example of subsystems are Gentran integration server, or you can call it, right now they are named as systems integrator, SI. We also have SAP process integrator, JCAPS, web methods, etc. And these are all third-party applications. The last component is WAN. WAN stands for Value Added Network. The main function of WAN is to route the data to the training partners. And we already discussed the protocols used to route the data. It can be WAN to WAN interconnect, it can be OFTP or ODed OFTP, plain FTP, AS2, etc. And these are third-party providers, service providers, and usually they charge clients, for example your company, by kilo characters they transmit on a given time frame. You could have an agreement with the WAN saying that, for a given month I want to have 1 million kilo character, and then WAN is going to charge you based on that one. Next, we will talk about the outbound process. What are the distinct steps that happens in the outbound process? So these are the color codes that I have chosen, and the color code of this one, which is the application, 2 is the message control, 3 is the IDOC interface, the 5 tasks that happens in network shared drive, then we have the EDI subsystem. And I have a detail of this process in the next slide. So let me go through verbally real quick on what happens. When a document is supposed to be sent to training partner, application creates the document, message control analyzes the document and says and decides whether it's relevant to send out. IDOC interface kicks in, creates the IDOC, and it kicks the file interface. The file goes to shared drive. From here it goes to subsystem, translation and delivery to the WAN. If we look at a more detailed approach, number 1, SAP application creates a document, invoice, for example, to customer. We need to invoice the customer. Message control, except FI, determines whether to send the document electronically. With that being said, do we have a setup in SAP that tells this particular customer is EDI enabled and we need to send him this invoice? Message control passes the information to IDOC interface to create intermediate document in the database. Task 4, IDOC interface triggers file interface to send the file to the shared directory and to trigger a script to push the file to the subsystem. IDOC files is just a text file which is human readable, but it is unlike EDI. In EDI you have the segments, definition, lengths, but IDOC's files are very big and is very hard to read. These IDOC files are archived in the Unix directory after transmission to subsystem. Step 6, subsystem receives the IDOC file and routes to IDOC to EDI map, because we need to send our training partner the EDI data. Step 7, mapping is performed. Step 8, subsystem routes the data to WAN for sending to the training partner. So this 8 step happens one after the other in case of outbound process. And if you set up SAP to send it real time, they happens the moment user saves or creates a document and saves it. Here is a note. Sometimes when you go to work, you may not see the file interface all the time. Some subsystem vendors, they provide early adapter for SAP. So instead of using this file interface, the Unix script, you could create an early interface to send the IDOC directly from SAP to the subsystem. And in this early interface creation, BASIS has a major role to play. Now let's take a look at inbound, which is the reverse of outbound. And here we have the same systems, EDI subsystem, network drive, we have the IDOC interface, and we have the application. Please note that we do not have the message control because it's only used for outbound. So let's take a step. Let's go to the next slide, which talks a bit more about all these steps that happen. And when you go to the next slide, I hope that you have a printed copy of this presentation that you could match it up with this flow. On the inbound, step 1, subsystem receives the EDI documents from WAN and routes the data. Subsystem translates to IDOC/application format, because when a data has to be sent to SAP, it has to be sent in IDOC format. Subsystem forwards the IDOC file to shared network drive. Network drive calls SAP RFC to process the IDOC file. RFC stands for remote function call, and what it does say that there is a script that tells SAP, hey, you have an IDOC file, can you process it? Step 5, SAP file interface reads the file and sends to application interface. Application interface updates database through SAP transaction or direct update. End users uses SAP transaction to view the TP document, and that ends the process. One thing I want to note here, there is a mistake on this presentation. Let me change it. On step 5, it should be SAP file interface reads the file and sends to, it should be IDOC interface, not application interface. Once it's an IDOC interface, then IDOC interface calls the application interface. So this is IDOC interface call this application interface, which updates the database through SAP transaction or direct update. One note about SAP transaction codes. These are short paths to menu items, and we did look at it when we did getting around SAP, or if you're already in SAP, you know the SAP transaction codes. This consists of alphabets and letters or numerics used by the end users to run business functions. VS01 create sales order, VS02 change sales order, for example. And this screen is very familiar by this time. As you can see through the menu path, we could go and explore or expand the folders or application groups to dig down to the end of the hierarchy to run the transactions. Now, commonly used SAP application codes or the transaction codes. We know that sales and MM or the metals management has the most interaction with the trading partners. From the sales side, the inbound, for example, when you are a supplier to a customer, in that the customer sends you the purchase order, which becomes a sales order in your system. And the transaction that used are VS01 and VS02. These are transaction codes. Create release schedule / shipping schedule when your customer sends you the releases for you to ship the goods on a certain date and time that customer wishes. You will use transaction code VA32. Incoming payment advice from customer when he is telling that, hey, I'm sending you the payment. You will use the FBE1 to create the payment advice, and that's another transaction to look at for the inbound. For the outbound is change sales order. This is where you send the confirmation to the customer saying that I have received your sales order. For outbound delivery, when you ship the goods to customer, you will use VL01N and VL02N. Create change invoice VF01 and VF02. And all these are application transactions. They will be executed by the end users, but on the inbound flow, these transactions executed by the IDOC interface to create the documents for inbound, and for outbound, message control acts or works with this application code or transaction codes to send the document outbound. Some more transactions on the MM side, the purchasing application. And this is where you are going to interact with your suppliers. For the outbound, create change purchase order. This on the MM side, ME21N and ME22N. Create release schedule, shipping schedule, ME84. Self-billing invoice or receipt advice, MRRL. And outbound payment advice when you're paying the suppliers. On the inbound side, create change inbound delivery, VL31N and VL32N. Please do note that for the outbound, all these transactions will be executed by the end users. For the inbound, this will be executed by the IDOC interface. The reason that I'm pointing out these transactions is because the more you get familiar with the SAP application transactions, the more expertise that you're going to have on the EDI. Because without the application transactions, the EDI does not make more sense. With that, I hope that you have access to SAP by now, and you could go to all these transactions just to see how the screen looks, what you can do. If you could do a F4 to pull out some data from the database, just view it, and it's going to help you out in the long run. With this, I will end this session. Hope it was helpful to you. See you in the next lecture. Thanks.